My name is Judith Pucci. I am one of quite a number at this point, Tribute Center walking tour guides. And this afternoon you're going to hear stories told to you by two of my fellow guides. These stories go beyond the historic events of the day that we all know well, that touched and changed all of our lives. Instead, they explore the personal costs of September 11th. So next to me are Mike Smith and Jeanmarie Hargrave. Mike is a now retired New York City firefighter. He retired soon after September 11th, and before joining the fire department, Mike spent years as a New York City police officer and as an emergency medical technician, as if one of those wasn't enough, right? If there was something dangerous, this man raises his hand. Jeanmarie has 3 grown-up daughters, and she lives in New Jersey with her husband. Her brother, TJ, worked for Cantor Fitzgerald. It was a bond trading firm. Cantor's offices were near the top of the North Tower. That was the first building attacked that morning. We're going to begin with Jeanmarie's story, so I'm just going to set the scene for you. As I mentioned, the first plane strikes the North Tower. It does that high up in the building, between the 93rd and about the 98th floors. Everyone above the 98th floor is trapped. Access to all elevators and staircases is destroyed by the plane. Jeanmarie's brother TJ was in his office. His office was on the 105th floor. All yours.
Thanks, Judith. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I want to talk about how I grew up with TJ and how 9/11 changed our lives. I grew up in an amazing family. I have to say that because my mom's here. No, I'm kidding, Mom. It was like a storybook family. We had rainy day picnics in the living room and talent shows on Friday nights, and every Sunday night was a roast beef dinner. And as the family got older, well, I have to say I'm one of 8 kids. All right, we have Maureen, who's here with us today, then Pat, Kathy, Marianne, Jeanmarie, that's me, Carolyn, Jamie, and then TJ. TJ was the baby. And as we got older, we would socialize outside of the home, but 9 out of 10 times when we socialized, it would always include 1 or 2 siblings. We went to the movies together, we went to the theater, the beach, concerts. We'd meet for drinks and dinner on a regular basis. We even had our own group. We called ourselves the Metro 5 of us who worked in Manhattan. We'd meet once a month for dinner. So I always had a great time with my family. I never laughed as much or as hard as I did when I was with my family. My siblings were my best friends, and they still are my best friends. And then 9/11 happened, and everything changed. As Judith said, I lost my brother TJ on September 11th. And with him, we lost the joy in our family. And to a certain extent, we also lost our family identity. It was really odd because afterwards, somebody would ask, how many kids are in your family? And the typical answer would be, I'm one of 8. But after 9/11, I'd say I'm one of 8. And then I'd go, well, I'm really one of 7. Well, now I'm one of 7. And it sounds like such a simple question, but it was really hard. Sorry, I get really emotional sometimes. And as simple as it is, it was really very complex. Excuse me. So it was hard to believe what had happened. There was a lot of disbelief, and because of that, it was hard to accept what had happened. And we just kind of became numb, because we couldn't believe it and couldn't accept it. And we didn't know a lot about what had happened. What we did know is TJ worked on the 105th floor for Cantor of Tower 1, and right after the tower was hit, the first thing TJ did was call my sister-in-law, Patty, his wife. They spoke briefly, they shared a few words, and before hanging up, TJ said to Patty, we're losing air fast. I have to go. I'll call you from my cell. And that's the last Patty or anybody heard from TJ. So it was really hard because we didn't know what happened. That's all we knew. And myself and many of my siblings, we were just searching for information. We wanted to see and know everything, but at the same time, you didn't want to see or know anything. And everything in our lives was 9/11. You know, we walked, talked, and breathed 9/11. We grieved TJ in 9/11. And it got to the point where it was almost obsessive. Our lives were 9/11. That was about it. Excuse me. So that went on for years. We all grieved for years. We all grieved in our own way. There was a lot of anger and frustration and sadness, great sadness, and fear, and to some extent guilt as well, you know, being the survivor. But over time, over time, it really didn't get better. It really went on for years. And then in 2010, I decided to volunteer for the Tribute Center. And I came downtown for the first time since 2001. And I signed up, got the training, and I started doing tours on the plaza and telling my story. And when I told my story, I would talk about the events of the day and TJ dying that day. But then, as time went on, I decided I wanted to tell people how TJ lived. I wanted them to know who he was and leave that impression. So actually, what I'm going to do now, I'd like to tell you a couple of stories that I share because they're really great stories, and there are a million of them, so I had to pare it down to just a few. When I think of TJ, the first thing is M&Ms. TJ loved M&Ms, and if he had it his way, they would be on the bottom of that food pyramid, you know, that everybody should have several times a day. TJ was a voracious reader. He would read everything and anything he could get his hands on. And I like to tell this story about when my brother-in-law Kevin first met TJ. He walked in, he was meeting the family, and TJ was reading a book. And he asked him what he was reading, and TJ said, E. And Kevin said, oh, I never heard of that. So TJ held the book up, and it was volume E of the Encyclopedia Britannica. That's how much he liked to read, and he read every volume, A to Z. A funny story about TJ is he went to a couple of different colleges, and when people asked him what school he went to, he'd say, let's cut to the short list. What school didn't I go to? TJ had this knack for making you feel like you were the most important person in the room when you were having a conversation with him, whether you were the only ones in the room or if there were 50 other people with you. He would remember conversations you had years before. He would say, remember you said blah, 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 and they'd be like, oh my God, I don't remember. And I said it, and I don't remember that. TJ used to sign all of his correspondence with the word peace, and now since September 11th, I signed all of my correspondence with the word peace. And after 9/11, we were putting together a video, a DVD, about TJ for his daughters. They were 4, 6, and 8 at the time that he died. And when we were gathering all the pictures and the videos, we noticed in so many of them he was holding up the peace sign. And that's so indicative of who he was. You know, he was a problem solver. He was proactive, not reactive. And that was such a nice feeling to discover that when we were looking at all the pictures. My favorite story that I want to tell you about TJ is his hugs. TJ gave the best hugs in the world. And the best thing about those hugs was that he was never the first one to let go. And I miss that, but I love that I have that to remember. So you wouldn't know it by looking at me up here, but I have to say, while we still grieve, I'm able to separate myself from that grief now. When I come down, I tell my story. I talk about the events of the day, how TJ died, and then I talk about how he lived. And when I leave the site, I separate myself from the grief. I leave it behind, and I'm able to move forward through the rest of my day, every day. And I also try to take with me his positive attitudes and his way to be proactive and respond rather than be reactive. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you for listening. Peace.
TJ was never found. He is among the, as of today, 40% of everyone who died on September 11th. Their remains have not been identified, which means that that morning, basically a little over 1,100 people vanished. As breathtaking as that is, there is another number I'd like to mention to you, and it is 20,000. That is about how many people safely evacuated the Trade Center that morning. This was an extraordinary rescue effort, as well as a day of profound tragedy. And the reason for the success of that rescue had to do with this city's first responders. For the fire department, the attacks began just as the night shift ended and the day shift began. So you had this overlap. The overlap meant that there were hundreds of firefighters in firehouses throughout the city. And when you're a firefighter and something happens, whether you're on duty or off, you're down here. And Mike was one of them.
Judith? So as Judith mentioned, I was a firefighter for almost 20 years, / police officer, and a combination of other things. However, on the morning of 9/11, as I was a firefighter, I was, like Judith mentioned, I was off duty. However, driving in to another location, I could see both buildings were on fire, and I was in another borough. And if you know anything about New York City, there's 5 boroughs, just another borough close by. When I saw those 2 buildings on fire, I said to myself, boy, I'm getting to this fire. This is going to be the biggest fire of my career, and I have to get there because I want to be there to put out that biggest fire in my career because I was at the end of my career. And I raced there, and I got there, and I thought I was the luckiest guy in the world when I got there because those buildings, although they were still burning, they looked like Roman candles at the top of them. And when I got out of my vehicle, I started walking towards the building, in a haste, of course. And then this unusual noise I could hear. It was more like that. 20 years like this. Never in my life have I ever heard such a thing. And as I got closer and closer, I could see. I looked up. One body after the next, after the next, after the next. After a while, I couldn't count anymore. And they're thumping. And you could see the grimaces on their faces. You see them pushing the air to try to help themselves. But of course they couldn't. And I'm standing there and I'm saying, police officer, EMT, firefighter. And I can't do nothing. I could only watch. How could I just watch? So the only way I knew was to go into that building as fast as I could. However, luckily for me, or unlucky, I was able to negotiate around the front of the building because where I was the back of the building. By the time I got within less than a football field away, 100 yards, 50 yards, stopped dead in my tracks again. An incredible noise, like standing next to a freight train. The ground just shook violently. And I'm shaking, the guys I'm with are shaking. And we're like, now what? What could that be? And I look up, 110th floor, onto the 109th floor, onto the 108th floor. One floor after another, after another, after another, pancaking, ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. There it goes. I'm told later, approximately 9 seconds. Now, all those years of experience, you'd think I'd be ready for something like that. And I looked, my jaw dropped. And I was frozen. I thought I was frozen there for 5 or 10 minutes. It was just seconds, and it felt like that. And then finally he kicked in and said, run as fast as you can, because if you don't run as fast as you can, you're a dead man. So I just instinctively turned and ran to where the best I thought was the safest route. Obviously it was, because here I am. Any other way, I wouldn't be here today. So I'm running, and I'm running. And this crystal, beautiful blue sky, severe clear, beautiful. Turned, I could see the debris coming off the building. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. Right across my back, knocks me down to the ground. The beautiful blue sky, when I wake up, it's disappeared. It's black as black could be. Close your eyes and run as fast as you can and think you're going to save your life. And that's what I tried to do. And I'm running, thinking I ran a mile and probably only ran 10 yards. Boom, right into the side of a parked car. Knocked me out cold. And I'm laying there, and by the time I woke up, I could feel my palate, my lungs filled with debris. It was caked in there. I couldn't even get it out. It was so much. And I'm fading fast, and I'm fading, and I'm fading. I said, you know what? It's not going to happen. I gave myself up. I said, that's it. What else can I do? I've tried. I'll leave it up to the Lord. I'm a goner. I said goodbye to my wife. Typical things you would think you're going to die. I said goodbye to my son. I never see his kids grow up, and my daughter, I never see their kids grow up. They were still in high school. I was waiting for those days. And the most beautiful thing happened to me as I gave up. I've got such a sense of calm and peace in my body from head to toe that I wish everyone could strive for in this world without the pain and the agony attached to it. It was like Zen. It was like whoever does yoga, it was the most Zen feeling in the world, most peaceful feeling in the world. It was awesome. And as I let go and just said, okay, here I am. Firefighter, police officer grabbed me by the shoulder. Boom, 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 boom. He thumped me up the street. And I'm going doop, 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 up the street, thinking I could hear one say to the other, he's dead. Let's just get him out of the way. And I'm like, I can't get it out, but I'm trying, but I can't get it out. So to get me to safety, they stick me up in Broadway, which is not too far from here. They stick me in the store for about an hour or two. And I'm saying, okay, like every good rescue worker, firefighter, police officer, military guy, whoever it might be, they all say to themselves, I'm going back in, because that's what we're trained for. We're going back in. By the time an hour or two passed by, both buildings had collapsed. By the time I got back to the recovery area, I was walking on top of crushed fire trucks, not knowing there were fire trucks under me. There was nobody left. It was like you could hear a pin drop. So things start to settle. You try to do your rescue, recovery the best you can. Hours go by, days go by. I'm there for 3 days. I was assigned a MASH unit, a morgue, so to speak, temporary morgue. So I'm assigned to that. And during that time, I said to myself every single hour, boy, when I get home, when they relieve me of duty, I'm going to pick up my kids from the school, and I'm busting out to my house, and we're all going to have some quality time. So I get relieved 3 days later. I go to the high school, and I walk into the principal's office, and I've never met this woman in my life, and she says, what's their names? I'll go get them. She just knew by the look on my face who I was, where I was, how long I was there. She just knew. I got my kids. We all gathered up. Hugs or cries, appreciation. And my daughter, who was a freshman in high school, says to me, hey, Dad, you know, before all this started, on the morning of 9/11, I had this premonition, this dream. I was sitting in the classroom, and it just came over me that you were in this really dark, dark place, and you were really hurting, and something was covering you. And I could almost feel it, but that's how I could describe it to me. I said, you hit it right in the head. That's exactly what happened to me. And, you know, we got through that, and we got home to the wife, and we said our whole story again. And it's humbling now that I'm able to come down here years later. It took me a long time to finally tell my story to you, who I so much appreciated that you're here listening to our stories. But now I love this part of the story because I'm able to tell my son's two sons soon their story, and my daughter's daughter her story. Thank you very much.
I have to give you another number, a very sad one, 343. 343, that is the number of firefighters who were killed on September 11th. They were not alone. 23 New York City police officers dead. 37 Port Authority police dead. September 11th is the worst loss of first responders in a single event, not in New York City's history, in United States history.